In our small, wind-swept town, nestled by the unforgiving sea, everyone knew Ilara. They saw her as a delicate flower, too fragile for our rugged world. Her hands were made for painting, not for mending nets. Her gentle voice was for singing lullabies, not for shouting over the roar of the waves. "She's too soft," the old fishermen would grumble, shaking their heads. "She wouldn't last a day if the sea truly got angry." Ilara heard their whispers. She felt their doubting eyes on her back as she walked through the market, but she never said a word. She just smiled, her eyes holding a depth no one cared to see. She spent her days painting the ocean, capturing its every mood, the gentle morning blues, the fiery sunsets, and the brooding gray of an approaching squall. The town saw art. Ilara saw a language. She was learning the sea's secrets, not with a rope in her hand, but with a brush. One autumn, the sky turned a bruised purple. The sea, usually a rhythmic neighbor, began to hiss and snarl. A storm was coming, the likes of which hadn't been seen in a generation. The warning bells tolled, and panic swept through the town like the gale-force wind. Doors were barricaded, boats were tied down with trembling hands, and families huddled together, praying. The seasoned sailors, the strong men who had called Ilara weak, looked at the churning black water with fear in their eyes. Their experience told them this was a battle they might not win. But Ilara was calm. She stood at her window, not with fear, but with an intense focus. She wasn't just seeing a storm. She was reading a story she had painted 100 times. While the town braced for impact, Ilara noticed something everyone else missed. The tide wasn't just rising. It was pulling back in a strange, unnatural way near the old sea wall, the one that protected the lower village, where the oldest residents and young families lived. The men were all focused on the main harbor, securing their livelihoods. They had forgotten the wall, dismissing it as ancient and unbreakable. But Ilara, through her paintings, had studied its cracks and weaknesses. She knew the way the currents gnawed at its foundation. She saw the pattern in the waves, a brutal, focused assault aimed right at that vulnerable spot. She knew the wall would not hold. She ran out into the screaming wind, her small frame battling the gusts. She tried to warn the men, her voice nearly stolen by the storm. "The sea wall! It's going to break!" They laughed. "Go home, little bird. This is no place for you," they yelled back, their words laced with condescending dismissal. Tears of frustration streamed down her face, instantly whipped away by the wind. They wouldn't listen. She was alone, but as she looked at the houses huddled behind the wall, she saw the lights in their windows, and she thought of the children inside. Her fear turned into a fierce resolve. If no one would help, she would do it herself. She ran to the abandoned shipyard, her mind racing. She remembered the old, forgotten sandbags, piled up and rotting from years of neglect. They were heavy, soaked with rain, and almost impossible for one person to move. But desperation gave her a strength no one knew she possessed. One by one, she dragged the heavy sacks, her muscles screaming, her hands raw and bleeding. She hauled them to the weakest point of the sea wall, stacking them against the groaning stones. The waves crashed over her, trying to pull her into the icy chaos, but she held on, driven by a powerful, protective instinct. For hours she worked, a lone figure against the fury of nature. The storm reached its peak, a deafening symphony of wind and water. Then, with a crack like thunder, a section of the seawall crumbled, but not where Ilara had been. It was her hastily built barricade of sandbags that held, diverting the main force of the water. The lower village was flooded, but not washed away. Her small, desperate act had saved it from utter destruction. When the dawn broke, the storm had passed. The town emerged to see the devastation. And there, amidst the wreckage, they saw Ilara, collapsed from exhaustion, her body bruised, but her spirit unbroken, surrounded by the sandbags that had held the sea at bay. The fishermen who had mocked her stood in stunned silence. They didn't see a fragile flower anymore. They saw a lone warrior who had stood against the storm when they had all looked away. From that day on, no one ever called her weak again. They called her the heart of the sea, the quiet painter who taught them that the greatest strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it works silently, with unwavering love, to hold back the storm. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more tales of quiet courage. We'll see you next time.